my worst enemy. The flesh that's covering me brings me down to my knees.
Welcome to Sermons in the Park, a ministry exploring biblical truth from the Word of God, focusing on the truths that help us in our daily walk with Christ in every aspect of our lives. Now, here is your Reverend, Jamie McCaskill.
Hello, brothers and sisters, and welcome back to an all-new Sermons in the Park. As always, I am your Reverend Jamie McCaskill. This is just a little special one that I'm putting out here, an episode that, honestly, I'm putting it out early, but I just want to make sure that I get this one out, okay? Because as a Christian minister, when I tend to talk to people, to evangelize, if you will, people love to point out things like the subject of today's sermon as to why they refuse to become a Christian and stuff like that. And as I'm saying, this one's early because I originally wanted to do this one for Halloween, but it is the Halloween season, so it's still kind of on time. But let's talk about this dark moment in history, in American history. You see the title, you've seen the thumbnail, you know this one's about the Salem witch trials. Now, I doubt there are that many people who are not familiar with it, but for those of you who are not, the Salem witch trials were a series of hearings and trials that took place in Massachusetts, especially in Essex County, Suffolk County, and Middlesex County. This happened between February of 1692 and May of 1693, where the people began to persecute individuals who had been accused of witchcraft. Right? Now, the sad thing is hundreds of people. Now, make sure you understand this. Both men and women were affected by this. They were arrested, they were imprisoned, and they were tried for the crime of witchcraft. And contrary to the popular belief, none of those people were burned. Just do a little bit of research, you'll see that 19 of these people, they were hanged. There was at least one that I could find evidence of that was crushed under heavy stones. And there were at least five people who died in prison. As I said, this was both men and women, not just women. And also, I want to make sure that you understand that there were several reasons that this bizarre happening occurred. Social, there was the psychological, there was the religious, and yes, even political reasons that people did this. But no matter what the reason you choose to look at, one thing is for certain, and that is that these witch trials, especially the ones in Salem, were not biblical in any way, shape, or form. There are those who will try to argue with it, right? They'll point out like verses from the Old Testament, specifically two of them. The first one being found in Exodus chapter 22, verse 18, where we read, "Thou shalt not suffer a witch to live," right? The other one being in Leviticus chapter 20, verse 27, where we read, "A man also or woman that hath a familiar spirit or is a wizard shall surely be put to death." See, those who want to justify the trials will try to say that, God commanded death on anyone who was found guilty of witchcraft. Right? But then you're obligated, they'll say that we're obligated because of this to carry out that command. They'll say even today. Well, if you want to believe that, you'll have a difficult time with trying to explain to me what happened in Acts chapter 19, verse 19, where we read this: many of them also which used curious arts brought their books together and burned them before all men, and they counted the price of them and found it 50,000 pieces of silver. Now, what's happening in this particular verse is Paul has been, at that time, Paul had been ministering to the people in Ephesus. And a lot of these people were practitioners of witchcraft. And we read that what's happening here is they're bringing their books to be burned. They're confessing of their sins. And what does Paul do? Does he, well, according to these people, Paul should be stoning them. But no, we see Paul welcoming them in as they're confessing and repenting. And then you have Simon Magus as well. Simon the Magi, Simon the Magus, however you want to call him. Over in Acts chapter 8, verse 9, it says, but there was a certain man called Simon, which before a time in the same city used sorcery and bewitched the people of Samaria, giving out that himself was some great one. So does Peter begin to stone him? No. What we read is Peter rebukes him. So if we're meant to obey that command to kill a witch, then why didn't Peter pick up stones and start stoning Simon Magus? Why didn't Paul begin to kill the witches who were coming to him burning their books? You see, when we look at the Old Testament, we need to keep one thing in mind. That law that was given to Israel, the nation of Israel, at that time, they were under a theocracy. They were the only nation in all of history to be under the direct authority of God. And by that, I mean politically and legally. You need to remember something. God did not want a king to rule over Israel originally. No, God declared himself to be the one true king of Israel. Look at 1 Samuel chapter 10, verse 19. And ye have this day rejected your God, who himself saved you out of all your adversities and your tribulations. And ye have said unto him, Nay, but set a king over us. Now therefore present yourselves before the Lord by your tribes and by your thousands. So by the time of Jesus and his apostles, Israel was no longer a sovereign nation. They could no longer carry out all the laws of God. Just to show you, I want you to remember something. When the Jewish leaders of Israel presented Jesus for crucifixion, what did they do? They took him before Pilate. You see, why would they do that? Because the Jewish leaders at the time needed permission. They were under Roman rule. So, what about today? Remember, we are no longer under the law. We're under grace. That's what we read in Paul's letter to the Romans, chapter 6, verse 14, which reads, For sin shall not have dominion over you, for ye are not under the law, but under grace. Now, saying that, I want you to understand something. I am in no way, shape, or form telling you that you have an excuse to go out and sin. What this does, us being under grace and not the law, it opens the door of mercy to anyone. They can confess and turn their back on their sin now. I don't care how bad their sin is, God will forgive them. But back to the Salem witch trials. They were not biblical, right? in the way they were carried out, right? If you will research them just a little bit, what you'll see is how they were done. It's very clear that the people who were accused were the true victims. They were victims of mass hysteria. They were victims of petty jealousy. They were victims of just good old-fashioned gossip. There was not very much evidence presented during the cases that would verify the charges. They used things like hearsay and circumstantial evidence, which would be thrown out of court now. Most of the cases were just one person's word against another, and sadly, once you charge someone, the courts rejected the word of that victim. And sadly, when you looked at the people who were responsible for the trials, they were probably more guilty of the sin than the person who they were pointing their finger at. The rule of the day was lies, gossip, and slander. God was not honored in any way during that. These people who were carrying out the witch trials, they show us that they do not have the love of God in them. And the strongest indictment against them can be found in the Bible in 1 Corinthians chapter 13, verses 4 to 7, that reads, "Charity suffereth long and is kind. Charity envieth not. Charity vaunteth not itself, is not puffed up, doth not behave itself unseemly, seeketh not her own, is not easily provoked, thinketh no evil, rejoiceth not in iniquity, but rejoiceth in truth, beareth all things, believeth all things, hopeth all things, endureth all things." So when people want to point their finger and say it was the Christians who did this, it wasn't. There was no God in this. There was nothing Christian, truly Christian in it. It was lies, slander, and gossip. That's it. And sadly, a lot of people lost their lives over it. A lot of people were tormented and tortured over it. But nobody was ever burned. And it's just a sad, dark chapter in the history of this country. And there were other witch trials too, outside of the U.S. and stuff. But the one we were looking at today was Salem witch trials, because it is Halloween season. It's a good time to talk about it. And this is one that's been on my mind for a while. I have a lot of friends who come to me with that whole, Christianity, blah blah blah, and I just want to put my word out there, what I've researched, what I found. In fact, one of them was Dan Todd, who we've talked to here on the show before, who's had me on his show before, and I need to get back with him. He wants to have me on his show again, and I'll have to soon. So thank you all. I love you. God bless you, and I'll see you soon.
You have been listening to Sermons in the Park with Reverend Jamie McCaskill. Be sure to follow us on YouTube, BitChute, and Rumble. And as always, thank you for listening.
There's joy for the morning, sinner be still. Earth has no sorrow, heaven can't heal. Earth has no sorrow, heaven can't heal.